Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not in the way the world gives, peace I leave with you. Peace I leave with you.
I do not know where life will lead, or what tomorrow's dawn will bring. But though the way is rough or smooth, the light of God will guide us.
Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not in the way the world gives, peace I leave with you. Peace I leave with you.
The war that raged among us all is ended in the love of God. To those who seek to take our lives, we give of them quite freely.
Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not in the way the world gives, peace I leave with you. Peace I leave with you. Brothers, sisters, let us come and bring our wounded lives to God. The Spirit binds us all as one, and peace is ours forever. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not in the way the world gives, peace I leave with you. Peace I leave with you. Peace I leave with you.
I have 4 gifts for you, my child. I have 4 gifts for you. They're all that I can give, my child, so precious and so few. I give you April's flower, my child. I give you April's flower to cherish life's unfolding, child. It is a gentle hour. I give you summer's green, my child. I give you summer's green. Drink deep her fragrant wine, my child, that gives you to your dreams. October is a gift, my child, wrapped in a fiery hue. A warm but sadder sun, my child, will greet an older you. I give to you a season, child, so cold and white and drear, but a warm hand in yours, my child, can melt the cold boldest fear. And all your wondrous life, my child, through all your troubles too, keep close to you these gifts, my child, and well they will keep you.
Belongs to God, Reflections on Peacemaking by a Conscientious Objector by Reverend David Livingston Edwards. Thanks to each of you for joining us. What you just heard were two of David's songs, Peace I Leave With You and Four Gifts, both of which have been made available to you to download for free on whatbelongstogod.com. Many of you knew David personally, and you know that his life was dedicated to peacemaking as a person, as a pastor, as a musician and a poet, as a friend and colleague, and as a husband, brother, father, grandfather, and uncle. What Belongs to God captures the history and inspiration behind his lifelong passion for peace. But in typical David Edwards style, his book goes far beyond his own life journey. He gives us tools for our own journeys of peace. In his book, David doesn't ask us to sit back and reminisce with him. He stands up and challenges us as individuals and as a community to be proactive with our intentions, whether they be large-scale peaceful protests or everyday peaceful acts. Sure, he shares his thoughts and theology with us in a deep, accessible, and knowledgeable way, but then he asks us to think about our own theology and whether we are living our truths as peacemakers and as children of God. In his own words from the book, what does it mean to love both neighbor and enemy? What does such a loving kindness or loving regard for others look like? Being children of this love, this God, means perceiving and acting towards others with equity and impartiality. A Buddhist teaching says that the rose doesn't give its fragrance to some but not to others. That is the same impartiality we are to show our fellow human beings. In Jesus' case, he refers to a God who makes the sun rise both on the evil and the good, and causes the rain to fall on the righteous and the unrighteous. The way of God's love, then, is just like the ways of the earth and the universe. It is given to all human beings, regardless of how they act, who they are, and what they believe. And it is this love with which Jesus commands us to love. This kind of loving, this way of living, reveals that we are children of God, that we are true human beings in the way we are created to be. In our short time together today, we will do more than look back on the life of David Edwards. We will look forward to discussing how to use this gift he left us, a guidebook for us to live a more peaceful, just, introspective, and impactful life. While we're here together, we hope you'll do more than just watch. We hope that you will engage with us. If you're part of this live broadcast today, please comment, like, and share. You can start now by saying hello in the chat and telling us how you know David, or give us a shout out about how you came to be here today. If you're watching this later as a video after this live broadcast, please comment and share, but most importantly, act. And now to launch this exciting and insightful book, I give you Kayte Edwards, David's wife and lifelong partner in peacemaking.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure David does as well. I want to begin by giving a big thank you to Bonnie Mill and David Mill. Without their help and support, this launch would not be happening today, nor would the website, whatbelongstogod.com, where you can go and order the book, find out more information about the book and about David, and you can also listen to and download for free many of his CDs. I also want to thank Linda McCrae, and the congregation of Central Christian Church Disciples of Christ in Indianapolis. They are sponsoring this book launch today. Later on, you will be hearing about the book from a few of them, as well as other friends and family members of David's and mine, and the editor of Front Edge Publishing. You know, even though David was a wonderful minister and he served 5 different congregations, he was a writer, a musician, a composer, a performer, but he considered giving up his draft exemption and becoming a conscientious objector to be the most important of his life. He would say that that decision and his 2 years of alternative service on the cardiac unit of Boston Children's Hospital was the most important ministry of his life. Even though he spent a lot of his life working on this book and thinking about it, he only finished it a few months before his death in March of 2019. On the day he realized that he was not going to survive the esophageal cancer that had already taken so much from him, he looked at me and asked, "What about my book?" In that moment, I promised that I would do everything in my power to see that this book got published. And with a great deal of help and support from many of you, today I fulfill that promise. This book is more than a simple memoir. It is certainly full of personal stories. Some are painful, some are joyful. But it is also a serious theological work. It looks at a number of biblical texts and also the life and teachings of Jesus. David challenges each of us to consider how we live our lives. Do our lives contribute to peace? Or do we knowingly or unknowingly contribute to the continuing violence in today's world? David believed that everyone, especially those of us who consider ourselves people of faith, to be called to be peacemakers.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Central Christian Church in Indianapolis, I would like first to welcome you. My name is Linda McCrae. I'm one of the pastors here, and we are honored to host today's launch of What Belongs to God: Reflections on Peacemaking by a Conscientious Objector. We wish we could welcome you in person and have conversation with each of you, but at the same time, we are thankful for this virtual space to share about this new book and the important questions it raises about our role as peacemakers in the world. As both Bonnie and Kay have already mentioned, What Belongs to God is the story of one person's journey, but it is much more than that. David Edwards has reflected on the Jewish and Christian scriptures and their call to live in love and nonviolence and to be makers of peace. He reflects as well on Jesus's attitude toward violence and nonviolence, on nationalism and materialism, and where our ultimate allegiance lies. And he challenges us through this book to take up these questions for ourselves, questions that connect with our deepest values as people of faith. As a pastor, reading this book raised a particular kind of challenge related to our youth. In telling his story of growing up in church, coming of age at a time when young men were being drafted to fight in the war in Vietnam, and applying to be a conscientious objector, David writes that no one in the church ever talked with him about the decision whether or not to participate in the military as a moral decision. My first thought upon reading that was how sad that was. And then I had to wonder about the youth in our congregation and whether they'd be any more equipped to see that as a moral decision. The fact that there is not an active draft at this time makes that question less immediate. But the bigger question of how we participate as a citizen of the US and of the world remains absolutely central. David talks later in the book about the terrible spiritual quandary that is embedded in our children and youth as they grow up with constant messages that our ultimate allegiance should be to our country. And meanwhile, in church, they grow up learning that their ultimate allegiance is to God, who calls us to a life of love that is willing to suffer for the sake of others. That quandary is really faced by all of us. And the forces of nationalism are so strong that if we do not face them directly, they will absorb us. Blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. But how do we make peace in this world? We will not all come to the same conclusions on how to move our communities, cities, country, and world toward peace, just as we don't have total agreement on the best road to racial justice, or how much we should all be taxed, or what economic system best serves our country and world. But the conversation is crucial. One opportunity for this conversation on this topic will be taking place this fall in our congregation, as we'll be engaging in a discussion of the book, What Belongs to God, over several weeks. We extend an invitation to you who are listening today to participate in this study. If you'd like to and are not a part of our congregation, please contact us through our website or our Facebook page, which is Central Christian Church, Indianapolis. As I close, I'd like to ask us, in the spirit of this book and of David Edwards' life, to pause for just a few moments and pray or hold an intention for peace. Whatever our tradition, our background, our politics, let us pray for peace and our own part in making that happen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Linda, for your words and for hosting us today. I'm honored to be here with you and with family and friends for the launch of What Belongs to God. When Kayte Edwards invited me to participate in this project and I read David's book, the lyrics of a song by Pete Seeger came to mind. It's a song we often sing in the Poor People's Campaign. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. We're down in Washington fighting against an age-old sin, nothing but mass murder done by age-old men. Our brothers and our sisters are demanding that we share soil, rocks, minerals, the ocean, and the air. No more some be rich while others dirt poor. All around the world, we say, poverty no more. Here we are in Washington, full of hope and pain, to see if some folks gonna listen, or will they pluck their ears again? We haven't got much time left. The sands are running out. Peace, justice, freedom. You can hear the whole world shout. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. And every life belongs to God. As I read the book, I kept hearing those words. This, I believe, is the central thesis, so carefully unpacked by David Edwards in What Belongs to God, Reflections of a Conscientious Objector. David, of course, describes his decision to peacefully resist the Vietnam War, but so much more than a memoir of a moment in time. What Belongs to God illustrates the significance of bearing one's soul to the ultimate power of love and the impact this primary connection has on all other connections. I retired from active pastoral ministry in 2016 and had big plans to rest and do a whole lot of nothing for a long stretch of time. But shortly after my retirement, I received an early morning call before daybreak from William Barber asking if I would join him and the leadership team in the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. I received that early morning call as a call from God. My faith said yes, and my feet followed. And these last few years have been among my most meaningful years of ministry. I thought I was done, but the last few years working with William Barber and Liz Theo-Harris and the team and standing and walking beside 140 million poor and low wealth people in this country, almost half of the nation's population, poor working people struggling every day trying to survive. We believe that there are 5 interlocking evils and injustices of our day: systemic poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation, the war-based economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. We all know what racism looks like, but my friends, it's not merely calling someone a name or the action of an individual. The lethal violence of racist police officers is only one manifestation of the systemic racism that is choking the life of American democracy. The mentality that crushes a brother's neck, as in the case of George Floyd in Minneapolis, shoots a man jogging because of his skin color, as in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, is the same mentality that sends Black and brown and poor and low-income workers of all colors into the lethal path of the COVID-19 pandemic without needed protections, without health care, and without adequate economic resources. We believe that this is the cause and work of our time and extend an invitation for you to join us. And so, as I conclude, I have 2 announcements to make. One, the Poor People's Campaign announced just on yesterday that we have joined with members of the Majority Leader in the U.S. Senate and the Progressive Caucus in the U.S. House to introduce a resolution titled Third Reconstruction, fully addressing poverty and low wages from the bottom up. Trickle-down economics really don't work. We've got to lift from the bottom up, and all boats rise. This resolution draws on the transformational history of the first Reconstruction following the Civil War and the second Reconstruction of the civil rights struggle of the 20th century, a constitutional commitment to establish justice and recognize that policies that center on the 140 million poor and low wealth people in this country, that is good economic policy that can heal and transform the entire nation. So I invite you to go to our website, Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, to learn more about this resolution and our work. But the second announcement I have, and I've shared it with Kay, is that the leadership team of the Poor People's Campaign looks forward to working with the publisher of this book, What Belongs to God, to promote it as a resource that we recommend for people doing the work of justice, peace, and freedom. David's words affirm the call upon all of our lives to resist lesser allegiances, to live as though we believe everyone has a right to live and every life belongs to God. And so we say, thank you, David, for illustrating not just with your words, but with your entire life, the humility and priceless nature of our common humanity. Thank you.
Peace. Shalom. Shalom. I am David's son, Kent. For those of you who do not know, my pronouns are he, him. My mom originally asked me to share some words about my father and how his book and his life affected me through my activism. Unfortunately, once I started writing, I realized it would be far too difficult to sum up my father's effect on my life in roughly 2 to 3 minutes that I had been allotted for his book launch. This book truly is my father's legacy, although he would never have referred to it as such, because he didn't ever place high reverence on the way he walked or carried himself. He merely did what he believed. And quite honestly, I highly doubt my father would have even wanted to participate in a book launch like this. He sincerely did not like doing things to bring attention to himself. My father was way more than a conscientious objector. He was a peaceful and loving person, and he lived a very contemplative life. He believed in nonviolence by any means necessary. And trust me, because raising me was not an easy task whatsoever. What Belongs to God is much more than a book on conscientious objection. It's a template that helps us make decisions rooted in the loving, peaceful, justice teachings of prophets like Jesus. Being a conscientious objector truly was my father's only option. And never was that more clear to me than after 9/11, when I was faced with the very real possibility of the draft being reinstated. I was 23 at the time and fresh out of college. And in a very honest conversation with my father, I revealed my fear and confusion. We spoke about the very real possibility of the draft being reinstated. He provided me with information about petitioning for CO status and encouraged me to share it with my friends. I seriously considered the information, but my feelings were conflicted. I also wondered about the potential things I might do to avoid the draft. I had just had an ACL reconstruction surgery. Could that be a way out? I had asthma. I had a history of depression. I was thinking everything that I possibly could. One thing that I did know, however, was I couldn't imagine myself going to war, let alone killing anyone. But at that time in my life, I was still concerned about other people's opinions about me. There was all this newfound patriotism happening as well. Flags on cars and front yards, on freeways. You saw them on every politician's lapel, and all throughout the athletic industrial complex. I remember thinking, like, am I betraying my country? My confusion brought me to realize that it was time for me to wake up. Well, I remember waking up after the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education March that I attended. I started connecting the dots. The amount of money the US was spending on the military compared to education just didn't make sense. And it seemed as if we were always in conflict against darker looking people. I began participating in anti-war marches all over DC over the following months. My father told me how proud he was of me for thinking through these issues and standing up for what I believed. Today, I continue to be very involved in demonstrating, supporting, and speaking out for the rights and freedoms of all marginalized people. I'm committed to working for justice for all people through movements like Black Lives Matter, Ride to DC, Fitness for All Bodies, Black Trans Liberation, the Poor People's Campaign. Those are just to name a few. Through my activism, I truly believe such commitment honors my father's life. Thank you.
My name is Dick Hamm. I'm a retired Disciples of Christ minister and former general minister and president of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada. David Edwards was a good friend and colleague, and one of the most deeply Christian men it has been my pleasure to know. He was and is the real deal. His new book, entitled What Belongs to God, demonstrates the kind of godly thinking that led him to a life of pacifism and an understanding of the Bible that is rooted in the best sort of scholarship. While not everyone will agree with all David's conclusions, everyone will benefit from experiencing this story of his life's journey. His deep, authentic Christian commitment sings from the pages and will uplift and inspire all who read it. We are in a particularly perilous time as a nation and a world today. We see the Bible used by so many to justify all matter of unchristian thinking and behavior. In What Belongs to God, we see a man who does not go to the Bible to confirm his own biases and beliefs, but who goes to be confronted and transformed by what he has read. It is a balm to the honest seeker, an antidote for the theological and spiritual malpractice we see everywhere, so evident these days. David writes, "Allegiance means giving our whole lives to something or someone. In the case of the Jewish Christian tradition of spirituality, this means recognizing that our very lives, in their totality, belong to God alone." This was certainly the message of Jesus and the pattern of his life. I miss David's presence among us very much. This book reminds me of what a gift he was to us all and helps me experience again his honesty and commitments. I commend to you without reservation what belongs to God.
Hi friends, I'm Reverend Jason Stanley. I'm an ordained deacon in the United Methodist Church, and I had the great privilege of working with Kayte Edwards on the discussion and action guide, Choosing Peace, which is included in David's book, What Belongs to God. As a deacon, my call is to word, service, justice, and compassion. And David's story tugged at my deacon's heart, and I found myself needing to respond. This wasn't a book that I read and then put on the shelf and said that was a good book. This was a book that demanded something from me. I needed to do something. And the response came when I learned that here in Virginia, where I live, abolishing the death penalty was going to be coming before the General Assembly. And so I joined a small group of United Methodist leaders to get the word out and to encourage other faith leaders to advocate for the abolishment of the death penalty. And it was because of David's question, what belongs to God. It convicted me. It moved me to be more involved in abolishing the death penalty in my state as a follower of Jesus. I ended up creating and living into my own peace plan, which is the hope for the Choosing Peace discussion and action guide that's part of this project. The guide, using the acronym of PEACE, leads individuals and groups through a process to develop their own peace plan. P is presence. Presence with God. It's about setting the stage and focusing on the present moment where we are, inviting God into the midst of this important work. E is experiencing. What did we experience as we read the book? What was our response? A is awakening. And awakening is exploring our personal stories as it relates to David's story. And one of the neat things about awakening is we often find ourselves learning more about ourselves than we did before we started. C is connecting. And that is connecting as we theologically reflect on the sacred text of our faith. And finally, the last E in acting is answering the question, what now? And acting is about designing and implementing a peace plan. So as you or your group walk through this guide, which can be used in a retreat setting or a one-day workshop or over the series of a couple of weeks, the goal is for you to develop a plan where you intentionally choose peace. And friends, in the midst of all that is happening in our country and around the world, we need more folks to choose peace. Every day we hear the cries of those who are experiencing injustice or oppression or marginalization of some kind, and we need to have more folks respond by choosing peace. Oftentimes the question we ask ourselves is, why, God, why? Why is this happening in our community? But I think that David's book and what I hope the Choosing Peace Guide does is it invites us to ask a different question. God, what can I do? How can I choose peace in this moment? And what does that look like? I hope that you will take advantage of this new book, and I hope that you'll take advantage of using the guide either individually or with a small group of friends. And I hope that you will be motivated to choose peace. Blessings.
Thank you for your patience with our glitches in the video. I'm really glad that we haven't had any glitches in the audio because the words are very important, and I appreciate every one of them that the speakers have shared with us. As you know, today we're introducing you to the book, What Belongs to God, but we're also giving you so much more. As Jason mentioned, there's a study guide inside the book that will help you with your own peace plan. That's David's style. And there are free additional resources for study and reflection at whatbelongstogod.com/study-guide. Here you can download PDFs that will help you, your organization, and your faith community. And there's wonderful music, of course, which is also free to download at whatbelongstogod.com/main-music. The music you'll find was created and performed by David Edwards. He wrote music for worship, music for children, and music for the enjoyment of all. David recorded 7 CDs and created music in the Chalice hymnal of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. His music remains as an expression of his life and of life itself. Kay is sharing the music that David created as a gift to add meaning to all of our lives. Thank you, Kay. On What Belongs to God, you can hear and download MP3 files of his songs. You can download PDFs of his music sheets, and you can download more than 40 responsive psalms to use in services of worship. Oh, and by the way, the book includes a heartwarming introduction to David's music written by Kay, his partner in peace for over 50 years. We hope you enjoy all of these gifts to their very fullest. And now, to round out the celebration event, I'm inviting David Crumm to join me for a quick Q&A about the book. David is the founding editor of Real readthespirit.com and Front Edge Publishing, a very enthusiastic publisher of What Belongs to God. Welcome, David, and thanks for joining us today. It is so great to have you.
Very happy to be here.
So let me start by asking you this question. Why did Front Edge decide to publish What Belongs to God? Because I know you are choosy about what you put out there.
We are. And there was something about David Livingston Edwards that just haunted me from the beginning of looking at the manuscript. And I've read the book a dozen times. And the best way I can describe it, I never met David Edwards, and yet he feels alive to me. He feels like he is around me. I think as a publisher, we look for books that form communities in the world. And of course, David had a huge community around him. But this is really, I've described this as a book on a mission. It's as though he's still with us, still teaching. And I want to compare it to two very vivid images that just haunt me in media. One of them is the final scenes in the Academy Award-winning movie Nomadland, where Fern continues on the road with others. Fern is out there somewhere with us, right? And of course, the most famous illustration of that is Tom Joad in The Grapes of Wrath. And I actually pulled out Tom Joad's final line that's delivered in the movie. I'll be all around in the dark. I'll be everywhere. Wherever you look, wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. I'll be there in the way guys yell when they're mad. I'll be in the way kids laugh when they're hungry and they know supper's ready. And when the people are eating stuff they raise and living in the houses they build, I'll be there too. I think when you encounter the fullness of David's life, and I never met him, never met the man, through the story, through his music, through his witness, he could have voiced these lines from Steinbeck and Tom Joad, I'll be all around there. I'll be everywhere. And I think even though he's no longer with us, that's what happens when this book comes out into the world. So that's why we chose it. We wanted to be part of continuing this prophetic mission, his life on down the road, because it is so timely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's good to hear somebody who's always known him all my life to know that he still has that effect on people who haven't been able to be with him in person. What about your personal impact of this book? I know you talked about why, as a publisher, which was very personal, which is kind of what you do. Why do you personally think this book is so important?
We founded Front Edge Publishing and Read the Spirit. We actually, on the very first day we were in existence in 2007, we posted to the internet, like nailing on the wall in Wittenberg, our 10 principles of media. And we boiled them down into one line, which is good media builds healthy communities. So what I look for in a book project is a story, a voice, a book that can build community. And so even here in this video that we'll share with people after the live event, we're seeing a United Methodist friend who came on board and helped to develop a study guide. One of the first commenters when we published a launch story in Read the Spirit magazine was Ed McNulty, who's a major writer for the Presbyterian Church, who said, I had never known this man existed. I had never known his music existed. I am now going to be using and spreading the word. So we've also heard early on that there are already a couple hundred copies of the book pre-sold on Amazon, even though today's the launch date. So clearly this is building a community. One of the most moving passages, I think, in the book, it appears on page 49 of the book, and it's so appropriate because we're launching right around Memorial Day. David talks in the book about how the default in most churches is to honor those who served, and he points out that often we forget to honor those who served in peacemaking. in peacemaking service in the community. So this is as a publisher, this is my vision for the book, that we are building this robust, it's ecumenical, it's interfaith. We're going to be publishing a column next week that has a Muslim commentator referring to David's book. That's what we're about in trying to bring this book into the world.
That's amazing. And we're really excited to hear about the Poor People's Campaign getting involved. And, they've been involved life-wise. I'm really glad that they are connecting on this level as well. So lastly, how can people, we've talked a little bit about, the book has a study guide in it, and there are some resources on whatbelongstogod.com, but what other ways can people stay engaged and help the launch of this book, which is part of, as you said, a movement that has been going on a long time?
At the very beginning of this broadcast, people heard the word, most of all, act. And then the question is, but what do we do? And there are so many opportunities to act. You just pick up the headlines, a daily newspaper, and read the headlines every single day. There's a way we can act in the world on behalf of peace and justice. It is so needed. How do we do that? And there just are not many voices out there that come at this from calling us to the roots in our religious traditions. And of course, David is specifically writing as a Christian, but in many of our religious traditions, the tools of peace that we can bring to this. How do we act? So because of what Kay Edwards has done, the Edwards family has done, the Mills have done, so many people have contributed to this. Our United Methodist colleague who helped with the study guide, this is a whole robust, you get to meet David. You get to meet him and sing his songs.
Yeah.
You can not only sing his songs, you can share his songs. And let me just say, to anybody who's watching this video, who is a gatekeeper, who is a teacher, a preacher, a small group leader, a Sunday school teacher, a community leader, just a parent who wants to pull together a community group, this team has provided all the rights and permissions you need to be sharing these materials. What we're looking for is ways to continue telling the story. So the final thing I want to say is, if you're out there and you're going to be discussing this book in a small group, a Sunday school class, just among your family, just among your book club, your whatever you call it, men's group, women's circle, email us, tell us about it. We want to hear what you're doing. We'll do a story about the fact that you're talking about it with friends. We want to hear what your impressions are. Review the book on Amazon. Let us know. So you can reach us at info. We have multiple emails, but a simple one is info@frontedgepublishing.com. That's a simple one.
Okay.
The website, whatbelongstogod.com, there's also a connection point in there. It's pretty easy to find us. Find us and let us know. I would love it if every single month for the coming year, we've got another news item about somebody making use of this remarkable resource. We're really committed to that. So tell us your story. As this broadcast ends, it's your opportunity. Tell us your story.
Thank you. That's awesome. And thank you so much for sharing your story and for sharing this book with the world and being such a huge part of that. Thanks so much, David.
Well, we are honored to do that.
Along with Kay, Shelley, Kent, and David's sisters, Sylvia and Carol, and everybody who talked to you today and has been part of creating this book and celebration event, we thank you, not only for joining us today, but for picking up the torch and carrying it on in your own way. And special thanks to my Aunt Kay, who poured her grieving heart and soul into bringing this book to life. Thank you. Through What Belongs to God, David's spirit will live on, continuing the work of peace, equity, and justice for all. As Kent mentioned, those of you who knew my Uncle David know that he would be very uncomfortable with all this attention, but it would be worth it if it led to peaceful action. So let's take action. Let's practice peace over violence every time. Let's lift each other up instead of keeping others down. Let's be peaceful in a bold, brave, and brazen way. Let's conscientiously object. Thank you. Peace.